because a couple weeks ago we tried this, and I think it was the solar storms that day were messing with everything. So, welcome to Breaking the Silence, conversations on addiction, grief, and healing. And I'm super excited to have Becky back. We did a coffee chat a few weeks ago, and kind of a precursor to being on each other's shows, and we had a blast. And so I'm
Oh,
super
yeah.
excited for you guys to get to know her and, let her share her stories and what her superpowers are in this world. So I will just turn it over to you. Whatever comes up. Introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and share whatever you feel called to share.
Ooh, okay. You've left it broad.
I did. I like the raw.
Okay. So I'm Becky. And let's see here. I am a 1-3 mental projector. If somebody is into human design, that was really, really eye-opening to discover my design. Let's see here. I've got 3 kids. I've been a homeschooler since 2003, the year that my oldest child turned 5. I only have one more left at home though, and she's almost done. She's got 2 more years. Let's see here. Coast Guard mom. And my oldest daughter is expecting her first baby in a month.
Yay.
uh,
Oh, how fun.
yeah. On a professional note, I've got a podcast, as you alluded to earlier. It's called Slightly Unhinged, but very insightful, and it's about the intersection of business and trauma, grief, and nervous system dysregulation. That came about as I was doing my own healing work on the things that brought me to the point of watching a man that I had loved all of my adult life devolve into the pits of hell of addiction and ultimately having to leave him. Um, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. However, I also made choices along the way that brought me to that, um, and
Yeah.
kept me in that. And healing those has been really, really interesting. And I was like, I wonder if these patterns are showing up in business too. Oh yeah, yes they are. I turned into a big nerd
Yeah,
and
they do.
dove down some rabbit holes, and I was like, this is really cool, and I bet I'm not the only one. And so I started to decide I would share what I was learning with other people, not from the 10 months ago, I was a broke single mom living in my car with my 3 children, and now look at me in front of my mansion. No, it's the messy beginnings and messy middles, and what it looks like to learn and evolve and grow. So that's that.
Yeah, it's a whole. Those patterns show up everywhere. So what we do in one area of our life and how we function, and those patterns show up in one area, show up in everything. And even if we don't see them right away,
Mhm.
um, and we just have to start peeling back the layers and learning to focus. Where is it affecting me in this moment? That's the big thing. Instead of trying to take it all on, at one time, we're here for the experience and to learn how to peel back those layers as we can handle it. Because if we go at it all at once, our nervous system is not going to handle it well.
That's really interesting that you say that, because I just did my Facebook posts for today. And I was talking about I'm a big fan of what I call teeny tiny goals. I don't do the whole reach for the stars thing, because I can look at myself in the mirror and go, "Oh, Becky, you are a stunning beauty, and you are a size 4, and you make $1 million a month," and my brain is gonna go, "You're full of shit, Becky," and nothing's gonna change, right? But if I look at myself in the
Right.
mirror and I go, "You know what, Becky? It is possible that today you can make better choices about what you eat, and you can make better choices about how you move your body." My brain goes, "Yeah, it is possible that I could do that." And maybe it'll be definite that I can do that. And I do, or I don't. Sometimes I still choose not to, but
Right.
more often than not, I'm making those choices, right? But that's a believable thing, and the more evidence I have to support the belief, the it happened, um, the stronger that gets, and eventually, ideally, I'll be able to look in the mirror and go, you know what, Becky, you have a healthy, fit body that does what it needs to do, moves the way that it wants to move and needs to move, feels good, and you don't carry shame about it. And my brain won't laugh at me
Right.
anymore. That's the aim. But
Absolutely.
I'm not there yet. But laying the groundwork with these little teeny tiny goals is like, okay, yeah. So that, yeah, totally down for that.
Yeah, and celebrating those all along the way and having the gratitude, because gratitude raises our frequency so
Mhm.
fast that if we have that gratitude, so if you say those things in the mirror today, I'm so proud of you and I'm so grateful that you did make better choices and move your body, and celebrate those things, because we don't do that enough. We don't take that time to pause and
Mhm.
pat ourselves on the back for a moment. And
Mhm.
that's where growth can happen exponentially, is looking back, because even now I still have to stop and intentionally look back and see how far I've come. Up on October is 2 years since my oldest died. And, you know, most days it's day by day or moment by moment. And if I don't look back and see how far I've come, I can't celebrate.
Mhm.
But we need to do that more
Mhm.
often in the moment too.
Absolutely. I would definitely agree with that. Yeah. So, ooh, it's no small thing though to do that, to remember to do that in the
Yeah,
moment. Um,
absolutely. I've been
so
talking a lot. Seems like this week there's been a collective thread of um, it. I had a session. I don't remember what day it was. A few days ago, uh, with Kelly Duffin. She actually was on my list, and I did a recording with her. Hers hasn't published yet, but we were talking about um, habits, and and it was just a few days before we had that session, and then it's come up in conversations with other people in my circles since then. You know, if we want different outcomes and we want to change those patterns that we've put up with for so long, we have to create different habits and different choices and different actions. And so I've
mhm.
been really intentional about, you know, I want to create new habits that will break those patterns that I know aren't serving me anymore and didn't really serve me then. They served me a lot of shit, but I
Well,
don't want that anymore, and I'm not willing to settle anymore.
mhm. Well, the thing is that people can say that it doesn't really serve them, or it serves them shit. But are you familiar with Existential Kink at all? The book Existential Kink.
No, but that sounds really interesting.
It is really interesting. It's a book by Carolyn Elliott, and it's shadow work. It's deep shadow work. And one of the
Right.
things that she talks about in there is that human beings don't do anything without some sort of payoff. So you're getting
Yes.
something out of everything that you do, and a lot of times, if your shadow side is running the show, like it is for a lot of us most of the time, um, the things that you're getting out of whatever it is that you're doing, that you're saying, it doesn't really do anything for me, or it's giving me shit or whatever, well, those are going to be really offensive to your conscious self, to your ego. Your ego's going like, oh, that's
True.
not, no. But uncovering that and healing those is the way through.
Right.
To
Yeah.
say, for somebody to, and I don't mean to pick on you, because I've done this myself, but for
Go
somebody to
ahead.
say, I'm not getting anything out of this. um, well, you're not doing a deep enough dive. For me, when I'm looking at, um, say, continuing to uh, loop through this really unhealthy uh, longing for what I had, because my ex-husband was a good man.
Yeah.
We had 20 years together that were overwhelmingly good. He was a overwhelmingly a good husband and overwhelmingly a good father, until he wasn't, until addiction did what addiction does to
Right.
him, right? Um, and when he started to devolve, um, I had a lot of different choices that I could have made, and I chose to stay,
Right.
even though I would say, I'm not getting any, it's not serving me. Well, it wasn't making things better for me, but it sure was serving me. It was keeping me from confronting my own discomfort that I would feel when
True.
I had to make the hard choice to leave. I knew it was coming. I knew there
Right.
would be a point where I was going to have to leave him, because he was not willing to face what was eating him alive and bleeding out all over me and our kids. I knew I was going to have to do it, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to feel mean. I didn't want to add more pain to somebody who was already hurting, somebody that I loved. And
Right.
so, was it about him, or was it about me? I mean, it's really kind of a crappy thing to say, that, oh, I didn't want to sit in my own discomfort over feeling mean doing what I knew I needed to do. It's kind of offensive to me, to go, oh, look, it wasn't so altruistic now, was it? But understanding that, it has been really important for my own healing process, and for how I will approach things going forward. Going forward, I'm not going to allow my desire to not be disliked, to not be the villain in someone else's story, to control what I do, whether I do the right thing for me or not.
Right.
So I don't know. It's just an example of one of those,
Well,
kind of
yeah.
things. Is like,
Well, experiences, even if we don't always understand that we choose it in the moment, but when
mhm,
we look back and we made those choices because it's comfortable, we don't. It's more comfortable to stay stuck than it is to step out of our comfort zone sometimes. But we're also there to learn lessons. We chose
mhm,
those soul contracts before we came in to learn those lessons. So those patterns that cycled through everything were teaching us those lessons. And obviously we needed to cycle because our nervous system couldn't have handled it all at once for that either. So, I went through 3 husbands, similar circumstances, that they were addicts, narcissistic, they were abusive, the whole range of abuse between all 3 of them. And I did that for 30 years before I finally said, this is not the outcome I want, or this is not, I want that for me. But then I had to change my
mhm,
habits and I had to dig deep and look at those
mhm,
shadows of, you know, victimhood and, being an enabler and being codependent and my own addiction to them, because being addicted to a person
mhm,
is very real. addicted to drugs and alcohol or any of that, but I was addicted to that stability and that intimacy, even though it wasn't healthy.
Trauma bond.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
I'm a recovering people pleaser, and I thought I could fix them because
Mm.
I didn't know any better then,
Mm-hmm. Yep. I get
So,
you.
we do the best we can with the skills and the knowledge that we have in any moment.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look back at everything in your past with that attitude and that mindset, then you can see past the pain, the hurt, the toxic, and you can see where the lessons are.
Mm. See, I run into some resistance on that point because I look at my history and I there are definite points that in my relationship with my ex-husband, that and early on that I saw as red flags. Um, I didn't realize how big they would become and how red they actually were, but there were moments that I'm like, this isn't okay. This isn't right. And I really shouldn't
Right.
ignore this. And I chose to ignore it anyway because I didn't want to live life without him. So I don't know that I can say I did the best I
Right.
could. I could have and should have put my foot down immediately and said, no, I'm not going to allow myself to be treated this way. And I know it. And I knew it then. And I chose not to do it anyway because I knew it would mean going forward without him.
Right.
So,
And yeah, and I can see that side of it too.
I,
But also hindsight is 2020, and when you're in the moment, those red flags may not look so red
well,
as they do years later.
right. Yes, definitely. I didn't know what I didn't know about, addiction and mental
Yes.
illness and his family history and all of that. He hid a lot from me. And
Mhm.
we met in college. We were in the Greek system. Everybody was drinking. I was the only sober person I knew. And so it didn't stand out as unusual. However, even with the benefit of 2020 hindsight, I can still say that I remember feeling those red flags and going, I really should do something about this. And I remember
Right.
choosing not to. And I remember choosing not to because I didn't want to live without him. And I didn't
Right.
that made me really uncomfortable because that's not who I saw myself as. But now that I've done a lot more soul work, I understand why I made that choice. But it doesn't mean that it was the best I could do. It was it was what I chose to do. I could have. I saw the fork in the road. I knew I had choices, and I chose to make the decision that I made. Now I don't regret it because I wouldn't have my kids without making those choices. Without making
Yes.
the choice to ignore that. And for them, I would go through it all and do it all over again, but I would have left sooner. I wouldn't have waited
Right.
until he did something
Yeah.
so
Absolutely.
egregious that I was like, "Oh, I'm out." So,
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think any of us that have been in those types of environments, you know, we see it as we look back. We should have left sooner, and
well,
they're
I knew.
obviously, yeah, I saw those too, and I think as you're in it longer, that you start to accept and settle, and you're also getting beat down emotionally, mentally, physically, um, to the point where I lost all of my self-esteem and all of my self-confidence, and came to the point that I believed I was not worth shit. And
Mm.
at that point, your mind is so suggestible because it's not telling you any different anymore. When, when I was a teenager before I got married, I was always very strong and independent and outspoken and rebellious. But then after a few years, that wasn't who I was anymore. But I
Mhm.
allowed those changes because I didn't speak up when I should have.
I think my story differs from a lot of people who find themselves in similar circumstances, in that my ex-husband was very, very functional for a long
Yeah,
time. It took a long time for him to succumb to this, and, like 20 years, before he really
yeah,
started, and so and he was not he was a good man who loved me and loved our kids
right,
as best as he could, until he was just a gutted, hollowed out version of himself. Um, and so
right,
he wasn't abusive in
right.
the sense that a lot of people think of abuse. He wasn't trying to, chip away at my self-esteem. He wasn't trying to,
Yeah,
to do these things. That he wasn't a narcissist until he was drunk. And then, you an addict, I think, is a narcissist regardless, because it's all about
oh,
their addiction and all
absolutely.
about them. But
Yeah,
he was, he wasn't like that, without the booze in him. And so
right.
he was a kind, selfless, caring guy for, a really long time. And so um I didn't get that constant chipping away and the erosion. He never tried to control me. He never tried to isolate me or anything like that. He was just absorbed in his own shit.
Mhm.
And so what happened for me was that, we'd have this blow up because I'd find another hidden stash of booze after he'd promised that he would stop, right? And so things would be bad,
Right,
and I knew I knew it was going to happen again, but I would allow him to apologize and promise never to do it
right,
again and whatever, and things would get better, and then we'd have the honeymoon phase where things were great.
right.
And then I'd start to let my guard down again, and then, and they would be great for a good long while at first, months sometimes. And then, then I'd start to see the signs that he was, drinking more than he should again, so it was the constant dangling of the carrot. The good times were always like, here,
Right.
this is who he really is, and this is what it can be if he just would stop drinking.
Yeah.
And he just couldn't, or, I mean, I say wouldn't because there's an element of choice. If there was no element of choice, then no person suffering from addiction would ever get sober. Um, so
Right.
he wouldn't. He wouldn't do it. It was too painful for him to face, and he's fucked his life. And it makes me
Right.
not, it doesn't give me any satisfaction. He's in a terrible position, but he put himself there,
Right.
and there's nothing I can do about it. So, yeah.
And that's it. I had the hardest time with because my mindset was if I did more, if I loved more, if I did better,
Hmm.
or
Absolutely.
fix this, and you know, but
Hmm.
there isn't anything you can do. It is on them, and
Hmm.
even though the addiction takes over at some point, they do have that choice initially or at different
Hmm.
points in their journey that they can make
Hmm.
different choices. And that's why people go in and
Definitely.
out of rehab because they want to,
Hmm.
at some point, they want to get better. But then I believe a lot of it is environmental. There's a lack of support, there's a lack of education. Um, there's a lot of different factors that we they're throwaways because we have such a judgmental idea of what addiction is that nobody wants
Yes.
to help. Nobody
Yes.
wants to be supportive, and they think it's a all choice, and it's not because
Hmm.
their brains are changed. And
Hmm.
I didn't understand it for years and years and years, and I just learned recently that even once an addict is sober for many years, it can take before they can actually have natural dopamine hits from not
Mm.
having their drug of choice.
Mm.
I'm like,
Yeah.
that's crazy. 10 years that they can't dopamine
Hmm.
hit from anything else. Actually, one of the gals that was on an earlier episode, um, she does extreme sports. She's been bungee jumping because that gives her a similar feeling,
Hmm. I've heard that.
but
I've heard
she
of
said
that
it's
before.
still not the same. Yeah. So,
Hmm.
but I can't even imagine not having that function and continuing to stay sober because you get that dopamine hit and they know that. Their body knows
Hmm.
that, their brain knows that. No wonder
Hmm.
they continue to use. It's just,
Oh,
it's
absolutely. Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. There's a couple of things about that are really interesting, and one thing I share my story widely because people don't understand that the families who have loved ones who suffer from addiction look more like me than
Right.
anything else, and my ex-husband was, spiraling for several years before I was open about it. And so you probably know people who are suffering from an addiction and you don't even
Yeah.
know it.
Right.
And so it's super important to pay attention to how you speak because about addiction, about people who are struggling with an addiction, they are coping badly with unimaginable pain. They don't have the
Yes.
the skills, and in my ex-husband's case, the desire to find and utilize the skills to cope with
Right.
whatever it is that they're carrying. And so, have some compassion, basically
Yes.
is what I'm saying there. But also then think about it this way. I love chocolate, right? And I remember this was years ago. Uh, I was like, "Ah, I just want some chocolate." And I found myself rummaging through my kitchen like a junkie looking for a fix. And I found, have you heard of Viactive? They are little calcium chews. They're chocolate
Oh,
flavored
yeah. Yeah.
calcium juice. I picked up a Viactive out of desperation because I found them in my pantry and I'm like, I'll have this instead. And the biochemistry involved with that was absolutely no different whatsoever than the biochemistry going on when my ex-husband would pick up a beer or a big jug of vodka. It's just less destructive and more socially acceptable. So if you start looking at your own patterns
Yep.
in life, most of us have addictive patterns in something, but most of us, it's not destructive to other people and it's socially acceptable. But imagine
Right.
if somebody told you
Well,
you
and that,
can't have that. You can't have that phone anymore.
yes.
You can't have those candies anymore. You can't have that, whatever it is anymore. How would you respond? Would you be able to easily just go, "Oh, okay." No, most of us wouldn't.
Right. Right. Absolutely not. And that's why alcoholism is so prevalent
Mhm.
because, first of all, it's a terrible, terrible effect on the body and the brain, but it is socially acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not just socially acceptable, but socially promoted
Mm-hmm.
to having fun.
Yeah.
And I have seen, because my older son, his choice of drug was meth. My younger son, he was an alcoholic. He was sober almost 4 years from alcohol, but we didn't know that he started doing cocaine and popping pills and
Mm-hmm.
doing things that he knew would not show up on drug screens while he was on probation. So everybody thought he was sober,
Ooh,
but he wasn't.
interesting.
Yeah. And the symptoms of cocaine use are almost identical to bipolar disease
That's
and
interesting that you would
disorder,
say that.
not disease,
Mm-hmm.
because we thought he was spiraling in a mental breakdown because he wasn't
Mm-hmm.
processing the grief from losing his brother and he had unprocessed trauma. So we thought he was spiraling with a mental breakdown, and bipolar tends to run in both sides of the family. So
Mm.
nobody had any idea that he was doing cocaine, and it wasn't as much the mental health symptoms we were seeing as much as it was the cocaine use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that bipolar thing is really interesting because I had my ex-husband when we were still married, I had him involuntarily committed because he was suicidal. And while he was in the hospital, he was evaluated for a serious mental illness designation. Big, big mistake. It sucked him into a morass of the system that was just wretched. But it was done automatically. When somebody is admitted for suicidal ideation, that's done automatically. And they diagnosed him with bipolar disorder type 2, which is, characterized more by depressive episodes than manic episodes. And I never believed that he had bipolar type 2 at all. I'm looking at him going, no, he is an alcoholic with CPTSD from abuse in his
Right,
childhood and the changes in his brain from the cheap vodka and stuff. Can we, before we slap a label on him, can we get him some
right,
counseling and some, EMDR, some timeline therapy, some whatever to deal with what brought him to this point to begin with and help him heal his soul wounds and then see if he's still displaying bipolar symptoms or not. But,
right.
no, that's not done.
No, no. And we had my younger son admitted um, 3 separate times in a 2 month period, and was in not even a 72-hour hold. Less than 48 hours. They diagnosed him, they gave him meds and kicked him out and gave him a list of resources to voluntarily
Hmm.
go to.
Hmm.
Well, number one, if you're having a mental issue, you're not going to do that. You're not going to go get your own help because 2 days on meds is not stabilizing you enough to think rationally.
Hmm.
If you're an addict, you're obviously not going. And they didn't give him the support. Now, he did stay the one time he stayed after the initial um, 72-hour hold. He did go on to rehab, but he was only there 2 weeks because this kid was super smart, super intelligent. He knew all the rules, and he knew if he said the buzzwords out, and then it wasn't fault. He didn't leave voluntarily, so he
Mm.
got himself kicked out in 2 weeks. But it this our mental health and addiction care and treatment is just
Atrocious.
ridiculous and broken. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
they failed both my boys. Absolutely failed my boys.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it doesn't.
So
We're
it's,
not done
and then
with.
when he came here,
Huh?
yeah, we're not doing anything about it. That's the scary thing.
Yeah.
Nobody's doing anything about that because there's still that stigma of addiction being a choice.
Well, I mean, it kind of is, and it
Oh,
isn't. You know,
yes,
the,
yeah, exactly.
it's
But
difficult. Yeah.
he came back. It is. It's crazy, and it's when he came here. It was right after he came out of that rehab that he came out to live with me because he had nowhere else to go. He had burned all his bridges, and he he had been telling me for months he wanted to come home, and we worked things out with his probation officer because he was almost done with his probation at that point. And so he came out here, and he didn't, and he stopped taking his meds, and now we're a legal state for THC, so we are medicinal and recreational. And I would much rather see him using that than taking the meds, especially when, he would get really agitated, and I'm like, are you taking your meds? Not necessarily that you need to take all of them, but if the anxiety meds are helping, why are you not taking them? He said, the anxiety meds I can take, Mom, and they sometimes help. But if I take everything, I can't even cry.
I've heard that before.
And I've heard that too. Like when Zoloft first came out, everybody talked about zombies, and I've talked to kids that were put on Zoloft and as teenagers, and I was like, well, you obviously have to feel. You need to experience the emotions in order to work through it. And so how can I say, oh no, you have to take these meds? Because they're not doing you good, and you're not in therapy, so you're not getting any support on any front at this point. Now the marijuana did help a lot. It helped with the anxiety, and it helped keep him calmer and more regulated. But then he started drinking again, and then it was, I really want you to help me regulate how much I drink, which worked great.
That doesn't work.
Until he would get, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't. Because once I said no, then he'd go find it somewhere else. Because once he was at that point of, I'm tipsy, that's where I'm going to be cut off. And then he couldn't stop at that point. And he didn't remember that, so then he would just go find it other places.
If they're drinking, like I could always tell when my ex-husband was actively drinking again, even though he wasn't showing me that he was drinking again, because his ability to be self-reflective and introspective and stuff would vanish. It just he could it was just gone. He was a victim. Everybody was out to get him. I was mean, just everything about the way that he spoke about his circumstances and about me and about, drinking and stuff. It was just like, you only talk like that when you're drunk. What are you talking about? You can't lie to me and tell me you're not drinking. I can hear it in your voice and in what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
No.
Well, and when when it's somebody that you know so intimately, you obviously can see those changes. And, my
Oh, for
kids
sure.
hated it. They were growing up because, you know, I could see it in them because I had experienced it with their fathers. And they're
Hmm.
like, how do you always know when we're high? Because I've lived it for years and
Hmm.
years. I know the signs, I
Yeah.
know the symptoms, and
Hmm.
but there, like you said, there's nothing you can do. Like he would do the little shooters, the 99-cent shooters, and his limit was 4 a day. He was a real lightweight. He would be drunk at 4, and um, and as long as he only bought 4, then we had no issues because he knew that that was all he had. But if he got a deal and bought 10, he couldn't stop at 4.
Hmm.
He'd say, "Oh well, I have 2.5 days worth if I buy these 10." But when it came down to it, after that fourth one was gone, then he'd be like, "Where'd you hide them?" And please, just one more. And it was the whole negotiation debate, And
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not going to be the gatekeeper for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I never got to experience that because I didn't take his booze or anything, but I know what you're talking about. Um, so yeah,
Yeah. Well, that was his idea.
yeah,
He said, "I want you to limit me. I want you to
I was
only
never given that option.
let me have this much."
That was not a
Well,
thing.
I think he realized because when he got past that tipsy point, then he had no control over. That's when he would get rude and obnoxious,
Hmm.
and um, he never got mean and violent with me, but he did to others or
Mm,
to circumstances. So
mm,
he knew something, and he he had spoken. We had an argument one night, and um, the next day, I I knew he didn't remember, and I brought it up the next day, and he's like, "What happened?" And he was so upset and so guilty because sober, my child wouldn't speak to me like that. No, he didn't do anything or violent or anything, but he had never spoken to me like that in 29 years. And
mm,
that's when
mhm.
he asked me if I would help him to not drink that much that he got to that point, but it worked.
Yeah, that's a real big sign of somebody who's got a problem because people that don't have problems with booze or drugs or whatever don't need to have somebody else control what they what they're taking, you know? Um,
Yes.
I
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I've heard that
Absolutely. He obviously knew there
I
was a problem.
right. Yeah, I heard somebody say once that what I didn't know when I met my ex-husband, was that in the early stage of alcoholism, somebody can go weeks, months, and sometimes even years without drinking, but they do it to prove to themselves and other people that they don't have a problem. And that's the problem. That's the
Yes.
sign of the problem because normal people don't need to prove to themselves or other people that they don't have a problem. So, since he would go weeks, months, and sometimes years without a problem, I was like, "What's going on? Like, is he actually an alcoholic? I didn't think that alcoholics could do that." And oh,
Right.
what I didn't know was huge. I wish I had known then, but all the schools talk
Oh,
about is,
yeah.
don't drink, don't do drugs. They don't tell you what to do when someone you care about is, you know.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and you have so many people that are functioning alcoholics,
Hmm.
that are high functioning. I mean, I have a
Hmm.
really good friend that was a very high functioning alcoholic. He owned a business. He went to work every day, you know, but he also bought
Hmm.
cases of Gatorade and, um, you know, hydration stuff
I know
because
where
he
you're
would
going with this.
drink both,
Hmm.
fisted
Yeah. Yeah.
and functional alcoholic. Had fun.
I
He
missed
drank
just about
his
everything
whiskey
you just
every
said.
night and to, yeah. Did I lose your audio?
You're lagging on my end at this point,
Can you still hear
and
me?
the video qualities. I can hear you, but you're laggy for me.
It just popped up
And frozen now.
and said it was reconnecting. I don't know if it's, oh well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, I just checked. I think my hotspot got hot. It was up in the window.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, they understand that you can be an alcoholic or an addict and still function and function well for a long, long
Hmm.
time. And
Hmm.
then
Yes.
everybody's blindsided because if they do have something that snaps and spirals, then everybody's like, "Oh my God, what happened?" Because they never
Oh,
saw
yeah.
it.
Yeah. I started asking my ex-husband's two closest friends for help years before he just tanked. And they both would dismiss me. They're just trying to be a controlling wife, blah, 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 blah. Because it didn't sound like the guy that they knew. And it wasn't. He wasn't the guy that they knew. And one of them
Right,
actually ended up coming to visit on his way across the country. And on his way out, he's like, I'm so sorry I ignored you and dismissed you because I see it now. I see what you're talking about. But it was too late. Neither of them would have been
right,
able to help at that point.
yeah,
And I don't
yeah,
know, truthfully, if either one of them would have been able to help anyway. You know,
yeah,
who knows? But they didn't. They didn't. Yeah. The bringing it to their attention, bringing talking about it with other people was difficult because he wasn't presenting to the outside world the way that I was seeing him when he was
yes,
drinking at home.
right,
Yeah. So yeah, it was a rough go. And I don't have all the answers. I wish that I would have recognized it earlier, and I wish that I would have been emotionally healthy myself, because I would have made different
right,
choices. But you attract people who match your vibe, right? And
right,
being with him made it very easy for me to ignore the things that were wounded in me because I could fixate on him. My stuff wasn't loud. It wasn't in your face. It wasn't destructive to other people. It didn't cost us money.
right,
My like all his stuff was just like impossible to ignore. And so I could channel all my time, all my love, all my energy, all my focus into helping him while I was ignoring all the things that were in
right,
me that led me to that point to begin with. And to his credit, he was a good match for my soul wounds Because he was kind and he was tender and he was gentle and he was affectionate and all these great qualities until he wasn't.
Right.
And until the booze did what it does. And you couldn't have told him even 7 or 8 years ago what was going to become of him. He wouldn't have believed you. I wouldn't have believed you. It just happened
Yeah.
slowly, one drink at a time, and you didn't. There was no point where I can go, that was the tipping point. It was just a slow, steady
Because,
decline until the
right.
difference between the guy that I divorced and went no contact with and the guy that I married was horrendous. It's mind-boggling to see how different that was. And our kids don't
Yeah.
remember him much the way that he was before. And so their,
Mhm.
grieving process for the loss of the relationship with their dad is really different than mine because I do. I remember what he was
Yeah.
like when he was fabulous most of the time.
Right.
And it's complicated,
Yeah.
but I will never allow him to speak directly to me ever again because he twists me up in emotional knots. And I don't
Mhm.
think that will ever go away. I think he will always have the ability to tap into my tenderness for him and my even no matter how angry I am at what he did, and I'm
Right.
enraged. Um, I still have tenderness for the guy that I married. And he will
Right.
always be able to tap into that and always be able to use it to twist me into knots. Um, and I won't allow that anymore. And I shouldn't have allowed it as soon as I recognized that was what was happening. And I did. I
Yeah.
did recognize. I knew that's what was happening, and I didn't stop it.
Right. And that bond, and like you, and I think you're right. A lot of it is trauma bond at that point. But when you have that deep intimacy, you know what buttons to push to get the results and the outcomes that you want. And we
Mhm,
learn that over the years. So it's,
mhm.
I can see that also, you know.
Well,
Took me a long, long time not to be intimidated by my second husband because he was the most physical,
oh,
and to not feel that intimidation and fear just being in his presence.
ooh,
And that
yeah.
took me a long, long time to heal.
Hey,
And
yeah,
obviously, he would egg it on.
yeah. Mm. Oof. Yeah, that's no good. It's it's hard because I don't know if you found this, but when I started diving into the support circles for people who had loved ones in addiction, there were two paths that I saw, and I didn't like either one of them. Um, One felt good to begin with, but it actually was awful and was the one that steered me the way that I ended up going to. The other one is AA, or Al-Anon. I went to Al-Anon a couple of times over the course of, as he was circling the drain, and I was so demoralized at the end of each meeting. I was like, oh my God, these people have been coming for 15 or 20 years and they are still complaining about the same thing. That's not what I want. I don't want to
Wow.
learn how to cope with the abuse. I want to learn how to help him not be that way. Wrong
Right.
focus. Wrong focus. I needed to learn how to be grounded enough in myself and my value and in my own willingness to be uncomfortable to leave that scenario. But the
Right.
second
Right.
one was a connection first. The opposite of addiction, the opposite of mental illness is connection of, when you put we instead of I in illness, it becomes wellness. And so, you can't the addict needs to know that they have love and support behind them and that they have something to come back to and all that. And so I went all in on that, and I stayed because I was like, if I leave, then he won't have anybody. And he doesn't. He doesn't anymore. He has alienated, or if he does have people, they're awful, horrible people that he has met
Right.
since we left. Um, but if I leave, he won't have anybody, and how can he ever heal if that's the case? And addiction heals in connection. So just absolutely insane. Not good for
Right.
on either end. But I don't have better answers other than
No,
maybe Mel
absolutely.
Robbins' book. Let them. Let
Yeah,
him do what
let
he's going to
them.
do, and let
And
me figure out what I need to do.
exactly. And the that I really like too is Byron Katie, Loving What Is. And
Hmm.
she talks a lot about staying in your business because we don't belong
Hmm.
here meddling in other people's business, and we don't belong
Right.
here meddling in God's business, because who's minding ours? That's what I did for years
Hmm.
and years, was I was trying
Yes.
to meddle in everybody else's. And it's a whole form
Hmm.
of control that I never even realized, because I'm not controlling, I don't try to control what
Hmm.
everybody does, but I'm still over here rescuing them, trying to save them, you know,
Hmm.
and that's
That's
not
the
my job.
codependency that people don't realize. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Now I
Well,
really
yeah, you
do
hear about.
like the work Coda,
Mhm.
codependent.org. They have some
Oh,
really good
I'm not familiar with
materials
it.
and stuff that puts you back in your own power. And you can still support people from back here and not be engaged in their chaos. And that's what I
Hmm.
had to learn to
Yeah.
do with my kids. And that's what this grief process has taught me, is it
Hmm.
wasn't my job to save them. There was nothing I could have
Yeah.
done to save them. And
Hmm.
so that helped me work through the guilt and the shame. And now I can step back into my own business and my own power, and I can do
Hmm.
energetic work and soul work and not engage in their chaos.
Right.
And that's the
Yeah.
only thing we can do.
Hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. It's interesting because, when you think about codependency, I think about, well, the codependent wife uh, finds her alcoholic husband passed out in the grass in the front yard and brings him inside, or cleans up all of his bottles around the house or whatever. I never did any of that, but he never did any of that either. He wasn't passed out.
Right.
And when he didn't go to work and his boss called, and that did happen, and boss is like, where's Clint? I don't know. He told me he was at work. What do you mean? And I thought he was at work. So, I wasn't lying or covering up for him at all. And I tried never
Right.
to, discount how my kids were perceiving things. If they would be like, is dad drunk? Yes, dad's drunk. you know
Yeah.
and so I never saw myself as a codependent person before, but I think, um well, my youngest is now sitting over just about 15 feet from me, and she's nodding at me. I think my kids would recognize, and she's got this self-satisfied little smirk. Really? And now she's laughing. um yeah. My kids think that I am a pushover. And you're getting better. I don't know if you caught that. She's like, you're getting better.
And that's what I love. When I first was discovered Coda, it was actually in a self love container, and it was doing mirror work
Mm,
in the through this container. And she gave us these resources from Coda.org, And man, when I looked at it and I was like, holy shit, because I never realized how codependent I was
Mm-hmm.
until I looked at this is, you know, what you're feeling or what you're saying or doing, but this is how you stay in your own power. I'm like, holy fuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
And, you know, it's crazy when you that switch turns on and your perception changes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then you step back and say, hey, no, I'm not going to do this to myself any longer.
Yes. Yeah. And you can't rush somebody to that point, at
No,
all. They have to arrive there themselves, and some of us take longer than others. Yeah, my kid is over there again looking at me. Yeah, you. Uh,
they're
my
our best
kids,
mirrors, aren't they?
uh, my kids were 10, 17, and 20 when I separated from their dad. And even my then 10-year-old was like, she was ready to be done with her dad. She wanted nothing to do with him at that point. And none of them really understood why I still cared. And they were like, just don't. And like, it doesn't work like that. Um, and so, you know, there were things that I had to do, and my oldest daughter is married now, and my son is married now. But my oldest daughter's like, now I understand a little bit better why you made the choices that you do,
Right.
because I put myself and her husband, I put myself and JD in this situation, and how much I love him, and if he ended up circling the drain like that, what would I do? How would I feel, or whatever? And thankfully, my son-in-law is probably one of the most emotionally healthy people I've ever met in my life. And so
That's
I don't
awesome.
foresee that being a problem. But being married herself and having somebody that she loves, like I loved their
Right.
dad, has kind of cracked open a little bit more of some insights into that, um, for her. Now, it's not I don't see that being the case for my other two, my bookends. But uh I can't control how they feel. I can't control whether they understand
Right.
why I made the decisions that I made. And yeah, I've got to release concern
Oh,
about
yeah.
that, I guess. So.
Yeah. And everybody perceives the situations differently. Even with my kids,
Mhm.
you could ask all nine of them growing up the same question and you'd get nine different answers, you know.
Oh, for sure.
And
Hmm.
my younger ones didn't, they don't even remember a lot of the experiences of abuse
Hmm.
because they were so young, but the
Yeah.
older kids do. So when
Hmm.
my younger ones started having mental health issues and physical issues and you know that unprocessed trauma, they don't even remember this of it. And it's like, they were all in completely different households.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I have three, but the spread between my oldest and youngest is 10 years. Um, and they each of them had very different experiences with their dad.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. And the dynamics are so different in every situation because
Hmm.
everybody's so individualized.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me. Tell us a little bit about what you do besides the podcast. I love the podcast, and I think I'm scheduled. I don't remember. Life has been so lifey lately.
Yeah, I think you are.
But I will be on.
Uh, um, so I have made a shift in my primary offer. So I help entrepreneurs who freeze, who ramble into an incoherent message that erodes their credibility with their audience, or who are just plain bored with their message. Like I've said it a million times and I'm done talking about what I do. Um, I use a coached, structured interview to uncover new ways, fresh ways of seeing themselves and their businesses with them, so that they can share that with their audiences confidently and with, you know, like enthusiasm and joy again, because it's said well and said in ways that don't feel so stale. So yeah, that's
So the
that's what
energy
I do.
aligns and you get that passion again.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Please
like
go
I
drop your links in the comments.
okay. Where do I do that?
Because I don't know. Well, it'll be on my Facebook profile. I don't know if you shared also,
Okay.
if you connected any channels, but it'll be on my Facebook, and I'll send you the YouTube link so you
Okay.
can drop
Okay.
comments
All
in
right,
there
perfect.
too.
Sounds
I
good.
will check
Okay.
it link because I don't know if it's actually broadcasting there or not. But
Okay.
I'll send you that
Okay.
also
All
if
right,
it's
sounds
on
good.
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
And
Sounds good. Thank you much.
thank you so much. Yes. Have a wonderful rest of your 999, because if you're into
Oh, yeah.
numerology, this is a huge portal for us. Doesn't happen again for
Mm.
another 9 years.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, it's
Cool. All right.
yeah, it's
Sounds good.
9 months, 9 day, 9 year. So
Mm.
it's the ending of cycles.
Cool.
Big portal.
Yeah.
We had eight. We had eight for this month, and they also have the 999.
Mm.
So, all right.
Fascinating.
Well, I will.
Okay.
I know we'll get connected, and I will go check your calendar and let me know if you get a chance. Thought I
Okay.
scheduled. I can't remember if I did.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Catch you later.
All right. Take care.